Over many decades, there has been significant progress in advancing gender equality and attempts to eliminate discrimination against women. But there's still much more work to be done. Beyond the notion of it being a basic human right, there are, of course, huge socioeconomic ramifications as well. Meghan Markle is an actress who co-stars on the USA Network's legal drama Suits. She's also a UN Women political advocate for participation and leadership. That group has called for the year 2030 to be the expiration date for gender inequality. We'll get an update on that effort with Meghan, who joins me in studio. By the way, Meghan is also the founder of the TIG. That's a website for those with a hunger for food, travel, fashion, and beauty. It covers about everything but fooling around.
Pretty much.
What is that?
The TIG?
TIG.
Well, you know, it's so funny. The namesake actually comes from a wine that I had that was an aha moment, Tignanello, which people sort of pronounce Tignanello here in the States. And it became my nickname for moments of getting it, moments of clarity where something is not just red or white, as with the wine, but really has some depth to it. So, yeah, the site has been a really nice resource for me to share all of those passions.
It's a website.
It's a website, yes. And it was
called
also
just
actually
the TIG?
just thetig.com. And it's actually where UN Women reached out to me because I had written a think piece about the same sort of things we're talking about, right? About women's inequality and hoping to find a way to find self-empowerment. And because they had read this piece, they ended up saying, we would really like to work with you.
What is UN Women?
UN Women is a branch, obviously, of the United Nations, but I think as it being a young organization, what they've really been striving to do between the He for She campaign and then, of course, the work that I'm doing with them, which is specifically trying to find women in political positions, be it from a grassroots leadership level or beyond that, to say we need to have a seat at the table and we need to be leaders that are really comfortable having our voices heard, because when women are uplifted, the entire community is.
What does the work entail? What do you do?
Yeah, so last February, actually, I went to Rwanda, which was incredible because Rwanda has the highest percentage of female political participants of any other country in the world. So 64% of their government is female.
Wow.
So when you see 64% of the senators being women, it just changes the conversation that's at the forefront. So I went there to meet with those leaders and then to also go to Gihembe refugee camp and to meet with female leaders at a more of a grassroots level. And then take that information, use things like this and use opportunities like I have on the TIG to talk about things of really high value.
With all the problems Rwanda has had, how do you explain this seemingly contradiction?
I think it's really, truly, and especially being there on the ground, it was so interesting to see that in the wake of, obviously, such a horrendous experience that they had, which was not much more than 20 years ago or so, right? We're talking something that was fairly recent. Yeah. And in that, yes, so many of the men were lost in the genocide, so it gave women an opportunity to either succumb to that or to then find some strength and then mobilize in a way that was really empowering. And I think that's specifically what they've done, which is a great benchmark for what women all over the world could be doing.
Where in this dilemma does the United States stand?
I mean, I think what's been really interesting, and especially as you see with social media, it all goes beyond something that's just with a state itself, right? So with the US or with any other nation, everything's become a global issue. And so I think with women's empowerment and certainly gender parity, you talk about the Millennium Development Goals, right? Number 3 is gender equality. And I think the US has been so active in speaking out on, trying to have more female leaders. And I think especially watching the youth really mobilize and be involved and engaged in that campaign to make sure that men are uplifting women and see the same value in it. It's not just a women's fight for women. It's a people's fight for all people, right?
Yeah, I've always been... Where's the worst area? What country would be the worst in the area of inequality? Well, I would guess Saudi Arabia or the...
Well, I mean, I think that it's all relative to where we're talking about, and what's challenging when you ask a question like that is that you have to take into account the cultural context, right?
Yeah.
So when you're looking at places that have a dual legislation and a legal system that's looking at, yes, the government, but also a religious law, there are certain standards that are quite different. So to say the worst is challenging because I don't want to put that judgment on some things that certain cultures are comfortable with, but in terms of women feeling certainly disabled to have the same rights, yes, Saudi Arabia would be a strong one to mention.
There are more women than men in the world.
Yes.
Women live longer.
Yes.
Because you do it to us. Anyway, you would think that this would have advanced even faster.
You would think that, but things take time, and I think if you look at the traction, especially that's happened in this past year, with this being at the forefront of conversation, it's a really hot topic right now, right?
Oh, yeah.
So how fantastic that it's making dinner table conversation, that we're talking about it, that it's something that people aren't ashamed to talk about anymore. And I think that, you know, even I go to Rwanda again on Monday, with World Vision actually this time, to talk about a water campaign. And people would typically say, well, what does water have to do with women's rights, and where is the correlation there? I think what's been really interesting is it's all so interconnected. And when you look at something like that, you say, okay, well, building wells, sure, you have the water and you have the life source, but what it also does is enables young girls to not have to walk miles to get water for their family, and instead they're able to stay in school. And that education is going to foster them being able to be very active in their society and empower female leadership.
What are the biggest obstacles?
You know, I think the biggest obstacles are perhaps people being set in their ways.
Entrenched.
Sure, you know, like having a very clear, be it from what you learn at home or what you're comfortable with, change is difficult for people. And you know, you watch some of these fathers or men who are supporting their wives or daughters in this, and perhaps in some communities, those men are shunned by their friends saying, what are you doing? You're upsetting a norm that's been comfortable for us. So it takes a lot of courage for anyone to be able to, excuse me, fight against what has been customary and say, even if we've been doing this for a long time, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing that we should be doing. And I think it's time for change.
What do you make of it locally here? What do you make of when you see things like Academy Awards and women don't get the same pay and they don't get the same shots at directing as men?
Right.
Now, this country has changed so quickly in the area of LGBT.
Correct.
In other words, why not faster in women, men?
Well, we're certainly talking about it enough.
No, we're talking, but...
Yes, but where's the action?
Yeah. Words are easy.
I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, certainly when it comes to the pay gap, it's staggering, right? And I think it is nonsensical. Do I have personal experience with it? Absolutely. Do I hope to see that change the more that we're talking about it and being very comfortable in those conversations? Yes, but, you know, between Jennifer Lawrence and that great op-ed that she wrote about it, or, you know, Patricia Arquette being vocal about, I mean, it is now becoming more of the conversation. I think that is, you know, I'm not going to criticize the speed in which it's taking for it to happen.